At exactly 2:47 a.m., 3 HOA board members received 10,000 volts of electrical justice. And it was glorious. Picture this. A woman in designer yoga pants and her 2 accomplices, creeping across my yard with bolt cutters at 2 in the morning, planning to destroy evidence in a federal investigation. What they didn't know. I'm an electrical engineer. And my fence was now a perfectly legal trap delivering more voltage than a police taser. The crack of electricity lit up the night like lightning. 3 bodies flew backward. Screams echoed across the neighborhood. And federal agents arrived just in time to arrest them while they were still twitching on my lawn. This is the story of how a $500 fence violation turned into an 8-year federal prison sentence. My name is Dante Blackwood, and I'm about to show you what happens when an HOA Karen declares war on the wrong electrical engineer. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever dealt with a corrupt HOA? I promise yours didn't end with handcuffs and electric shocks. Let me back up and show you how we got here. 6 months earlier, I'd bought this modest ranch house in Willowbrook Estates with one simple dream. Peace after the divorce from hell. Dante Blackwood. 45 years old. Electrical engineer. Officially the guy who'd lost his marriage, half his savings, and most of his faith in fairness. The house sat on a corner lot with this weird L-shaped boundary, some surveying mess-up from the 1970s that actually gave me extra space. Perfect for the woodworking shop I'd always wanted. The sweet smell of cedar shavings and the satisfying weight of my grandfather's hand planes felt like medicine after months of lawyer meetings and bitter arguments. I should have known paradise wouldn't last. Veronica Sterling announced herself 3 weeks after I moved in. Designer heels clicking across my driveway like gunshots on concrete. Picture a 52-year-old real estate shark with inherited money, platinum blonde hair that never moved in wind, and the kind of smile that belonged on a corporate hostile takeover. This woman didn't just live in the biggest house in Willowbrook. She owned it. And her weapon of choice? An actual yellow ruler for measuring grass height. I watched from my kitchen window one morning as she knelt in various yards, measuring individual blades like some obsessed scientist. The metallic taste of disbelief filled my mouth. But here's what really opened my eyes. Veronica's enforcement was surgical in its selectivity. When Jim Morrison down the street installed his chain-link fence, she brought him cookies and gushed about smart property investments. When Mrs. Patterson planted roses 6 inches over her property line, Veronica showed up with gardening advice and helped replant them in the perfect location. Then came my turn. The morning after my fence installation, identical materials, proper permits, 100% on my surveyed land, Veronica materialized like a bad omen. No cookies. No friendly chat. Just that Arctic stare and a violation notice that appeared faster than a parking ticket. This fence disrupts neighborhood aesthetic harmony, she announced, her white power suit crisp in the morning sun. It's identical to Morrison's fence, I said, pointing down the street. Her smile could have frozen lava. His was pre-approved through proper channels. Complete fabrication. I'd researched every fence in the development. Morrison's permit was filed 2 months after the HOA covenant. 0 pre-approval documentation. But somehow has never triggered a violation. That's when the ugly pattern crystallized. Over the past year, every single violation notice had targeted the same group. Me, the divorced black engineer. Mrs. Rodriguez, the single Latina mother working 2 jobs. Elderly Mr. Kim, who spoke broken English and kept to himself. Meanwhile, white homeowners with identical infractions got helpful suggestions and warm smiles. The taste of injustice burned like acid reflux. But the real gut punch came 3 days later. I was installing a motion sensor light by my garage when I heard Veronica's voice carry across the yard. She was chatting with her friend Janet from the next street over. Property values, you understand? Veronica's laugh sounded like breaking glass. We can't have certain elements bringing down standards. Sometimes you have to be creative about encouraging the right kind of turnover. The screwdriver slipped in my sweaty palm, nearly taking off my thumbnail. The sharp pain was nothing compared to hearing my existence dismissed as a certain element that needed managing. Standing there in my driveway, violation notice crumpled in my fist, I felt something shift inside my chest. The same cold clarity I'd experienced during my divorce when I realized the system wasn't interested in fairness, just power. Veronica Sterling had just declared war on the wrong electrical engineer. She had no idea that threatening a man who'd already lost everything was about to become the most expensive mistake of her perfectly manicured life. Veronica didn't waste time escalating. 2 weeks after the fence violation, she pulled what I can only describe as the inspection trap from hell. I was at work, elbow deep in a power grid repair that kept half the city's traffic lights running when my phone buzzed. Mrs. Tessa's shaky text. HOA people in your yard. Brought contractor. Taking pictures. I called Veronica immediately. Emergency property inspection, she announced with fake authority. Safety concerns regarding your unauthorized installation require immediate professional assessment. You can't enter my property without. HOA Covenant Section 4.7 grants emergency access for safety violations. Check your paperwork, Dante. The line went dead. That evening, evidence of their trespassing littered my yard like crime scene markers. Boot prints crushed my carefully planted marigolds. Measuring tape residue clung to my fence posts like surgical scars. Fresh violation notices tucked under my door claiming structural safety concerns and potential foundation damage. But Veronica had made one crucial mistake that would change everything. She'd forgotten about Mrs. Tessa. The next morning, my 78-year-old neighbor shuffled over with her ancient flip phone clutched in weathered hands. I recorded them, she whispered, glancing around like we were planning a prison break. Something didn't look right. What she showed me was pure gold. The video was shaky, filmed through her kitchen window, but the audio was crystal clear. Veronica's voice carried across my yard as she directed some contractor around my fence line like a director shooting a movie. Property values are everything in this business, Veronica was saying. If we can document structural issues, the city will require removal regardless of permits. The contractor's voice rumbled with obvious discomfort. Ma'am, this fence looks solid to me. Standard installation, proper footings, everything up to code. That's not what I'm paying you to find. Veronica snapped like a whip crack. I need documentation of problems. Safety hazards. Anything that justifies immediate removal. My jaw clenched so hard I could hear my teeth grinding. But the real bombshell was still coming. As they walked toward the street, Veronica's voice dropped to what she thought was a whisper. We can't have his type lowering property standards. 3 more families like him and this neighborhood becomes worthless. Sometimes you have to be creative about encouraging the right kind of turnover. The video ended there, but I'd heard enough. This wasn't random harassment. This was ethnic cleansing with a legal veneer. Been happening to others too, Mrs. Tessa whispered. Mrs. Rodriguez got a surprise inspection last month after she complained about street lighting. Mr. Kim got one the week after he asked about the playground renovation budget. Always safety emergencies. Always when they're at work. That weekend I transformed into a research machine. Years of troubleshooting complex electrical systems had taught me that every problem leaves a paper trail if you know where to look. What I discovered would have impressed a forensic accountant. HOA financial records showed Veronica's real estate company, Sterling Properties, had received $45,000 in association contracts over the past year. Emergency inspections, landscape consulting, property assessments, all flowing to businesses that traced back to her network like a spiderweb of corruption. But the smoking gun was buried in meeting minutes that Veronica probably thought nobody read. Emergency inspections required board approval and 24-hour resident notification. She'd been authorizing them solo, using presidential emergency powers that existed only in her imagination. Time for my counterattack. I filed formal complaints with the state HOA Oversight Committee, complete with financial documentation and Mrs. Tessa's video evidence. Then I installed 4 high-definition security cameras with night vision. Each mount clicked into place with the satisfaction of loading ammunition. My favorite touch? Professional no trespassing signs. Bright yellow warnings citing specific criminal statutes about unauthorized property access. 2 days later, my cameras captured Veronica's BMW crawling past at 5 miles per hour while she read every single word. She didn't get out that time. Veronica's response to my security cameras was swift and brutal. If she couldn't intimidate me with fake inspections, she'd go nuclear with financial warfare. The certified letter arrived on a Thursday morning, thick and menacing with the kind of official weight that makes your stomach drop. Notice of lien placement, $2,500 for continued covenant violations and failure to comply with lawful HOA directives. A lien meant eventual foreclosure. They could steal my house, everything I'd rebuilt after losing half my life in divorce court. The metallic taste of pure panic flooded my mouth. But the real gut punch was reading how she'd orchestrated this legal mugging. According to the attached meeting minutes, the HOA board had held an emergency session at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. No advanced notice to residents. No opportunity for defense. Just 3 board members rubber-stamping Veronica's vendetta over coffee and Danish pastries. My phone rang while I was still processing the financial death sentence. Dante, this is Janet Torres from Riverside Construction. I'm really sorry, but we can't do that deck project anymore. My stomach plummeted. What do you mean? We signed a contract last week. Look, I don't want drama, but word is you're some kind of troublemaker. Mrs. Sterling called around, said you were difficult, might not pay bills. I can't risk my reputation. Click. Deadline. Over the next 2 hours, I called every contractor in my contact list. Same story, different voices. Booked solid through next year. Not taking new clients. Try the next county maybe? Veronica was systematically destroying my ability to maintain my property, setting me up for more violations. But she just made a crucial mistake. She'd given me motivation to dig deeper than she'd ever imagined possible. That night, I transformed my garage into a war room that would have impressed a federal investigator. What I discovered was absolutely beautiful in its complete illegality. The HOA hadn't held a single properly noticed annual meeting in 3 years. State housing law requires 30-day written notice to all members plus published agendas. But Veronica had been conducting informal board discussions that somehow became binding votes. Every major decision, budget approvals, rule changes, contractor selections, had been made in direct violation of their own governing documents. But then I found the smoking gun that made my electrical engineer's brain light up with pure joy. Buried in a stack of invoices was a pattern that screamed fraud. Gerald Hoffman, the board treasurer, had been approving payments to Hoffman Tree Services for months. $15,000 in emergency landscaping over the past year, all flowing to Gerald's own side business. The bastard was literally signing checks to himself. My counterattack started at 8 a.m. sharp with a call to Sarah Martinez, a property attorney whose reputation for dismantling corrupt HOAs was legendary. This is prosecution-level material, Sarah said, her eyes lighting up as she reviewed my evidence. Improper procedures, financial conflicts, selective enforcement with clear discriminatory patterns. We're not just fighting the lien, we're taking down their entire operation. While Sarah filed our counter-lawsuit demanding emergency injunctions and full forensic audits, I organized a neighborhood resistance meeting at Murphy's Coffee Shop. 17 families shared their stories of systematic harassment. Mrs. Rodriguez had been fined for excessive decorations, 3 ceramic garden gnomes smaller than the stone lions guarding Veronica's driveway. Mr. Kim faced violations for inappropriate window coverings, traditional Korean screens that were actually more beautiful than the cheap vinyl blinds hanging in half the development. The pattern was undeniable. Veronica wasn't running an HOA. She was operating a protection racket with legal paperwork. By closing time, 7 families had committed to filing coordinated state complaints, creating an avalanche of documentation that would bury Veronica's corruption under federal scrutiny. While FBI agents were investigating Veronica's surveillance equipment, I was drowning in legal paperwork at the county clerk's office. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps as I sifted through decades of property documents, my eyes burning from hours of reading faded typewriter text. That's when I found the document that made my hands shake with pure rage. Buried in the original 1987 HOA charter was a clause that had been conveniently omitted from all recent governing documents. Section 12.4, Right of first refusal for corner properties. If any corner lot owner decided to sell, the HOA had to be offered the property first at appraised value before going to market. My corner lot. The most valuable property in Willowbrook Estates. But the real gut punch was waiting in a board resolution dated 3 months after I'd moved in. The HOA had designated Sterling Properties as their preferred acquisition agent for any first refusal purchases. Veronica would buy my house at appraised value, then flip it for market rate. Easy $75,000 profit off my forced misery. This wasn't harassment. This was a calculated heist dressed up in legal paperwork. Dante, this is racketeering, Sarah said after reviewing the documents. They've been systematically targeting property owners for theft. This goes way beyond civil violations. The next 48 hours blurred together in a haze of research and growing fury. Bank records showed Gerald Hoffman's construction company getting renovation contracts for every acquired property. Inflated invoices that split profits with Veronica's real estate business. Diane Walsh had been manipulating appraisals through her banking connections, ensuring forced sales happened below market value. 7 families over 3 years. Mrs. Rodriguez's corner lot near the park stolen. The Yamamoto family's Creekside property stolen. Each targeted homeowner subjected to escalating harassment until they sold just to escape the legal nightmare. The pattern was surgical, methodical, and absolutely criminal. Total theft, over $200,000 across multiple properties. Sitting in my garage that evening, surrounded by evidence of their systematic looting, I felt something fundamental shift inside my chest. They'd been stealing homes while hiding behind neighborhood authority, destroying families for profit margins, using legal weapons to commit organized theft. But they'd made one crucial miscalculation about their latest target. I wasn't some overwhelmed homeowner who'd fold under pressure. I was an electrical engineer who'd already lost everything once in divorce court. Someone with absolutely nothing left to lose and the technical skills to make their illegal harassment very, very expensive. The moment I decided to electrify my fence was 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. Sitting in my garage with my father's old electrical manual open on my lap, tears of pure rage burning my eyes as I read Veronica's latest legal threat. She'd escalated beyond liens and surveillance. The newest court filing demanded immediate property seizure for public safety violations. Complete fabrication designed to force an emergency sale. That's when the cold clarity hit me like a lightning strike. They weren't just stealing my house. They were stealing my last chance to rebuild after losing everything in divorce court. This property was supposed to be my fresh start. My sanctuary. My proof that I could create something good from the ashes of my old life. Veronica Sterling had just declared war on my future. Time to show her what an electrical engineer looked like when he stopped playing defense. The decision crystallized with mathematical precision. I would turn their next trespassing attempt into a federal case with physical evidence they couldn't deny or manipulate. An electric fence wasn't revenge. It was a perfectly legal trap that would document their crimes in spectacular fashion. Property protection laws were beautifully clear. Homeowners could install electric fencing for security purposes, provided it met safety codes and carried proper warnings. The sweet spot? 10,000 volts at low amperage. Painful enough to make trespassers reconsider their life choices, but safe enough to avoid serious injury liability. The same principle used in police tasers. 3 weeks of careful preparation followed. Agricultural store sold me a high-voltage transformer for livestock protection. Electronics warehouse provided capacitors and control circuits for my workshop upgrade project. Security dealer thought I was expanding my home alarm system when I bought motion sensors and backup batteries. My workshop filled with the rich smell of rosin flux as I soldered circuits that would have made my electrical engineering professors proud. Each connection had to be perfect. But the real genius was weaving this technical project into the legal war machine Sarah Martinez was building. While I programmed motion sensors and tested voltage levels, she filed injunctions documenting every aspect of Veronica's harassment. FBI cybercrime investigators were preparing federal charges for the surveillance network. State auditors were dissecting 3 years of HOA financial records with forensic precision. We were creating a legal environment where any attempt to vandalize my property would trigger multiple federal felonies with ironclad documentation. Installation weekend felt like preparing for battle. The transformer's quiet hum in my utility shed sounded like a sleeping dragon waiting to breathe fire. Warning signs went up citing specific state statutes about electric property protection. Bright yellow alerts that would make any reasonable person reconsider unauthorized access. But Veronica had proven repeatedly that reasonable wasn't part of her vocabulary. The documentation network was my masterpiece. Multiple camera angles would capture every second of any trespassing incident. Smartphone alerts would notify me instantly of system activation. Emergency shutoff switches would let me de-energize everything with one button press if needed. I even arranged for official property inspection of my security improvements, creating government documentation that everything met safety codes. By Sunday evening, standing in my backyard, listening to high-voltage equipment humming with potential energy, I felt something I hadn't experienced since signing my divorce papers. Complete control over my own destiny. Veronica Sterling had spent months trying to steal my home through legal harassment and fraud. She was about to discover that some electrical engineers know exactly how to make criminals regret their career choices. My fence looked exactly the same as before. But now it carried enough electrical authority to turn her next criminal act into evidence that would destroy her completely. With her bribery attempts exposed, her insurance fraud documented, and her defamation campaign backfiring spectacularly, Veronica made the decision that would transform her from suburban criminal to federal case study. She was going to remove my fence personally. At 2 a.m. With bolt cutters borrowed from Gerald's garage. The motion sensors woke me at exactly 2:17 a.m. with urgent phone alerts. Through my security app, I watched three figures creeping across my yard like the world's most incompetent burglars. Veronica led the charge in black yoga pants and a designer hoodie, directing Gerald and Diane with the confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences for anything in her privileged life. I called Sarah Martinez immediately. "They're actually doing it," I whispered. "All three board members. 2 a.m. About to commit felony vandalism on camera. Don't activate the fence yet." Sarah's voice carried the excitement of a prosecutor watching defendants confess on live television. "Let them fully commit to the crime. We want this documented from start to finish." But this wasn't random midnight vandalism. While I watched through my cameras, Gerald produced what appeared to be a professional evidence disposal kit. Plastic bags for fence pieces. Industrial cleaner to remove fingerprints. Even a small shovel to eliminate footprints. They weren't just planning to destroy my fence. They were planning to make it disappear completely. Obstruction of justice. Evidence tampering. Federal crimes that carried 10-year sentences. Every security camera in the neighborhood was capturing 3 HOA board members conducting a midnight evidence disposal operation while under federal investigation. But Veronica's masterstroke of criminality was still coming. As Gerald approached my fence with bolt cutters that gleamed in the moonlight, Veronica pulled out a tablet and began photographing my property with methodical precision. She was documenting evidence of code violations that she planned to submit retroactively, creating false justification for emergency property seizure. Fraud. Document falsification. Attempted theft through deceptive practices. Each photo she took was another felony charge that would stack into decades of prison time. At 2:45 a.m., Gerald finally positioned his bolt cutters against my fence post. Veronica stood behind him, tablet ready to document their discovery of pre-existing damage. Diane maintained lookout position, though her constant nervous pacing suggested she was more likely to attract attention than prevent it. This was the moment 3 years of systematic harassment and property theft would transform into federal evidence that would destroy their criminal careers permanently. Standing in my dark kitchen, watching 3 criminals about to receive 10,000 volts of electrical education, I felt something profound shift in my understanding of justice. This wasn't revenge. This was documentation. At exactly 2:47 a.m., Gerald Hoffman made contact with my electrified fence post. And the resulting display of criminal justice would have powered a small city. Crack. The sharp sound of 10,000 volts discharging echoed across Willowbrook Estates like a lightning strike, followed immediately by Gerald's shriek that probably woke half the county. He flew backward from my fence as if shot from a cannon. His bolt cutters clanging against the concrete driveway. His whole body convulsing like a marionette with tangled strings. The blue flash of electrical discharge lit up my backyard like a camera strobe, capturing Veronica's expression of absolute shock as her demolition plan literally exploded in her face. But Gerald was just the opening act. Diane Walsh, in her infinite wisdom, decided to help her injured accomplice by grabbing the same fence post that had just educated Gerald about property rights. Zap. The second electrical discharge was even more spectacular, launching her designer-clad body across my lawn like a rag doll, while her scream harmonized with Gerald's ongoing protests about his tingling extremities. 2 down. 1 to go. Veronica Sterling stared at her fallen comrades with the dawning realization that her criminal career was about to end in the most humiliating way possible. But instead of retreating like a rational felon, she grabbed Gerald's dropped bolt cutters with the determination of someone who'd rather get electrocuted than admit defeat. BZZZZT. The third shock was pure poetry in motion. Veronica's perfectly styled hair stood up like she'd grabbed a Van de Graaff generator. Her designer heels tangled in my chain link as 10,000 volts of property protection reminded her that some homeowners know how to fight back. She hit my flower bed with enough impact to replant my marigolds, her tablet flying across the yard and shattering against my mailbox post. The automatic emergency response system I'd installed worked exactly as designed. Police sirens wailed in the distance as my security system called 911, reporting electrical contact with trespassers attempting property destruction. What happened next was the most beautiful thing I'd witnessed since my divorce was finalized. Police arrived within 4 minutes to find 3 HOA board members sprawled across my yard like discarded crime scene mannequins. All of them still twitching from electrical contact. None of them capable of coherent explanation. Officer Martinez stepped out of her patrol car, took one look at the scene, and reached for her radio with barely controlled professional amusement. Dispatch, we've got 3 individuals down from electrical contact during attempted vandalism. Request EMS and additional units for evidence processing. But the real showstopper came when FBI agent Rodriguez arrived with my attorney Sarah Martinez and a news crew from Channel 7. Suddenly, my backyard looked like the site of a major federal bust, complete with evidence bags and media coverage that would make this the lead story on every local news broadcast. Agent Rodriguez surveyed the scene with the satisfaction of someone who'd just watched a 3-year federal investigation conclude with defendants literally shocking themselves into custody. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced to the growing crowd of neighbors and media, "you're witnessing the end of a systematic racketeering operation that has defrauded homeowners of over $200,000. The mic drop moment came when Sarah Martinez stepped forward with a briefcase full of evidence and a smile that could have powered my fence for a week. "As of this morning, federal warrants have been issued for the arrest of all 3 individuals on charges including racketeering, fraud, bribery, conspiracy, and violation of federal civil rights statutes." Veronica, still tangled in my fence with her hair resembling a science experiment gone wrong, managed to croak, "This is entrapment." Agent Rodriguez's response was pure professional satisfaction. "Ma'am, installing legal security equipment on your own property isn't entrapment. Attempting to vandalize that property at 2 a.m. while under federal investigation for fraud isn't entrapment either. That's just called evidence." The paramedics confirmed what my electrical engineering had predicted. Minor injuries only. No lasting damage except to their criminal careers and public reputations. 10,000 volts had provided exactly enough educational value to document their crimes without causing serious harm. By dawn, my yard was filled with neighbors, reporters, federal agents, and 3 very sorry HOA board members in handcuffs. Mrs. Tessa shuffled over with a thermos of coffee and the biggest smile I'd seen since she'd started documenting Veronica's crimes. "Best neighborhood entertainment we've had in 30 years, she said, watching Veronica being loaded into a federal transport van. Justice had arrived at exactly 10,000 volts. And it was absolutely beautiful. 6 months later, I was sipping coffee on my back deck when the final court settlement check arrived by certified mail. $247,000. Every penny Veronica's criminal enterprise had stolen from neighborhood families over 3 years, plus punitive damages, legal fees, and interest. The criminal trials had been swift and decisive. Veronica Sterling, 8 years federal prison for racketeering, fraud, and civil rights violations. Gerald Hoffman, 6 years for conspiracy and financial crimes. Diane Walsh, 3 years, plea deal in exchange for testimony. Their mugshots, featuring Veronica's electrified hair from our backyard encounter, had become internet legends on property rights forums. But the real justice was watching our neighborhood transform from a surveillance state into an actual community. The new HOA board, elected by actual residents, had eliminated all discriminatory enforcement patterns and restored financial transparency. Property values increased 15% once word spread that we'd purged our corruption problem. Mrs. Rodriguez got her garden gnomes back without violation notices. Mr. Kim's traditional window screens were celebrated as cultural contributions. My fence remained exactly as it was, still electrified, still perfectly legal, and now serving as a neighborhood monument to the principle that some fights are worth winning. The federal investigation had exposed similar HOA corruption schemes in 7 other developments across the state, triggering reforms that protected thousands of homeowners. Our case became a model for prosecutors dealing with suburban racketeering operations disguised as neighborhood associations. Standing in my workshop tonight, surrounded by tools and projects that represented freedom to create without fear, I felt something profound about the nature of home and community. This wasn't just about winning a legal battle. It was about proving that ordinary people could fight systematic corruption and win. The electrical hum of my fence system mixed with distant laughter from tonight's neighborhood gathering, creating a soundtrack of justice that would have made my father proud. So here's my question for you. Have you dealt with an HOA that thought they could push you around? A board member who abused their tiny bit of power? Drop your story in the comments below. I'd love to hear how you fought back, or wish you had. And if you enjoyed watching Veronica get 10,000 volts of justice, make sure to subscribe for more stories of entitled neighbors getting exactly what they deserve. Trust me, the stories keep getting better. Hit that like button, share your thoughts below, and remember, sometimes the best defense against bullies is turning their weapons against them. See you in the next one.